Hendon Hooker is all kinds of confusing as a prospect. He was spectacular at Tennessee in his final season, and he would have won the Heisman Trophy if he hadn't torn his ACL. Hooker showed good promise and played very well, and if he had won the Heisman, maybe he'd even be talked about as one of the best in this upcoming class. But not only did he tear his ACL, but he's already 25 years old. Hendon Hooker is a very difficult prospect to explain and analyze, but I'm gonna try my best. Hendon Hooker was a four-star top 25 quarterback prospect in the 2017 class out of Greensboro, North Carolina. Now, at James B. Dudley High School, he ended up winning states twice, and he accounted for more than 9,000 total yards and 100 touchdowns over 3 seasons. He was even named Prep's North Carolina Player of the Year in 2016. Hooker decided to commit to Virginia Tech over Notre Dame, NC State, and Pitt. In Blacksburg, Hooker redshirted his true freshman season and rushed 4 times for 57 yards and a touchdown the next year. In 2019, Ryan Willis started the first 4 games for the Hokies. You may recognize his name. He was actually the Spring League MVP last year. He threw 7 interceptions in those 4 games, and Hooker got his first start against Miami, and Hooker shined, scoring 4 touchdowns in a 42-35 win, and the Hokies averaged 36 points in Hooker's 8 starts in 2019. Now, somehow, transfer Braxton Burmeister started at first in 2020, but Hooker still started 7 games. He finished his Hokie career with nearly 4,000 yards and 37 touchdowns in 15 starts. Hooker then transferred to Tennessee. He played in all 13 games for Tennessee in 2021 after he backed up Joe Milton in week 1. Hooker ended up finishing the year with more than 3,500 total yards and 32 touchdowns, and the Vols went 7-6. They were fine. In 2022, all of a sudden, the Vols started 5-0 before facing an undefeated Alabama. Hooker threw for almost 400 yards and 5 touchdowns, and Tennessee beat Alabama for the first time since 2006. Hooker later then did struggle against number 1 Georgia, but they were still in playoff contention heading into a November matchup with South Carolina. Unfortunately, Hooker tore his ACL, which ended his college career. Hooker was the second Tennessee player to throw for 6,000 yards and rush for more than 1,000 in his career, and he was the 2022 SEC Player of the Year and earned 17 first-place votes as a finalist for the Heisman. Safe to say, if he would have finished the year, he would have won it. Hendon Hooker has a lot of things that are going to intrigue NFL teams. He has an NFL arm. He has quick release, he throws a good ball, and he's able to get the ball downfield with really good velocity. Hooker is a very, very accurate passer. I think actually the most impressive part of his game is his timing. Now, there are a lot of guys with good arms, but sometimes the timing and the anticipation isn't there, and that's a big issue. Hooker is great at, leading receivers. He's also good when it comes to making throws on the run, as long as they are shorter routes. So he struggles when they're deeper. Hooker is good on the ground if he needs to be. He has good legs and he can consistently gain yards. Hooker has great size, and that is, for whatever reason, still something teams love. He's 6'4". He had 10.5-inch hands at the combine. Plus, Hendon is a true leader, and I think he's very smart. His character has never been in question, and that's why a team may take a shot on him early. But maybe the biggest reason why a team might not is his age, 25.
Oh, damn! I'm sorry.
He's an older prospect, and that will scare off a lot of teams. For context, Hendon Hooker is more than 2 years older than Trey Lance and Sam Howell, both of which started a game last year in the NFL. And he's even older than Justin Herbert and Tua Tagovailoa. Since Hooker is so much older, you'd hope he'd be a lot more polished than he actually is. He holds the ball too long, he makes some panicky throws, he doesn't have great footwork. When he's on the run, he doesn't make good throws, and even when he does go to extend plays, he rarely throws the ball, he usually just puts his head down and tries to scramble, and that was super evident at Virginia Tech, and the same thing happened at Tennessee. I think that's one of maybe the most concerning things. You want a guy that can extend plays, but Hooker only does that with his legs. The offense that he ran at Tennessee is going to be literally nothing like a pro-style offense, so that's going to probably lead to a little bit of a learning curve. Physically, there are some concerns. Teams might want him to bulk up a bit, but bigger than that, the torn ACL in November is going to scare a lot of people off. He might just be completely taken off some boards for that. Usually, I actually like to give a good pro comparison, but I don't think there's a good one. You know, it seems like scouts all kind of have different guys, and Hendon Hooker is just such a weird, unique player. There isn't anything like super crazy about Hendon Hooker. There's nothing super flashy or anything that's going to blow your mind. But at the same time, he's had a lot of moments that really do show that he could end up being an NFL level player. When he has the time to sit in the pocket, he makes good quick throws, and that is absolutely when he excels the most. That was the case at Tennessee, and it was the case when he was at Virginia Tech, but I don't think there was a better example of that in a bigger moment than against Alabama. I'd say that ended up being the biggest game of his entire college career. The Tennessee defense had a very, very tough time containing Bryce Young, but Hendon Hooker and the Vols were able to hang 52 on a very good Bama defense. With 15 seconds left, tied at 49, Hendon Hooker had two of the biggest plays of his college career. Alabama ended up missing a field goal, and just suddenly Tennessee had a sliver of a chance to get a win in regulation. 15 seconds left. Hendon had 3 out to the left, spread out, 1 on the right, and a running back in the backfield, and his offensive line holds up long enough, and Hooker finds Ramel Keaton. 9 seconds left. 3 out to the left this time, 1 right. Running back in the backfield again, very similar, just switch it up. Alabama only rushes 4. Hendon Hooker has plenty of time. He finds and delivers a great throw to Brew McCoy, and that did ultimately lead to a game-winning field goal. Hendon Hooker didn't do anything crazy there, but he did exactly what he needed to, and I think that right there is the best sequence to explain his play and when he's at his best. He does what he needs to. Mel Kiper did just recently drop his 4th mock draft, and he has Hendon Hooker going in the 1st round to the Seahawks. Now, the pick currently belongs to the Eagles, but Kiper mocked a trade where Seattle moves up to take Hooker at 30. Kiper does have a 2nd round grade on him, but he has a lot of buzz around him right now. He led the FBS in QBR and yards per attempt. He only threw 5 picks last season, and he has good accuracy, but there are a lot of worries, and that's why he's not top 10. Kiper noted that it was a very quarterback-friendly system at Tennessee. He's 25, he's coming off of a torn ACL, but the Seahawks could be the perfect spot because he could sit behind Geno Smith, and that contract is really just a 1-year commitment if Seattle wants it to be. Daniel Jeremiah's most recent mock draft is still his 3.0, where he actually has Hooker going even higher at 23 to the Vikings. Minnesota could make a lot of sense. Hooker could sit behind Kirk Cousins and eventually take over. The Vikings have been doing their homework on this year's quarterback class, and they would likely like to move on from Kirk here at some point. And I also personally just think it'd be really cool if Hooker went to Minnesota, because his very reliable left tackle at Virginia Tech was Christian Darrisaw, now the Vikings stud tackle. Hendon Hooker is a guy that I have gotten to watch much more than any of the other people in this class, and that's because I did go to Virginia Tech. I watched Hendon Hooker for a long time. I've also always had kind of a strong connection with Tennessee, so I have watched almost every single game Hendon Hooker has played in his entire college career, and I feel like I know way more about him than any of the other prospects in this class. I have very mixed feelings about him because as a true person, I will absolutely be rooting for Hendon Hooker and will be a fan of him wherever he ends up 100%. That being said, as a prospect, I'm very weary of him. I think you obviously have the very obvious things like, torn ACL coming off of it, and even if that's fine, you're still looking at a 25-year-old who does have some things that he needs to polish up, and he is going to have to sit behind someone for a year. He's not ready to walk into an offense right now. I don't really think any of the guys, maybe other than a Bryce Young, could really step in right now. Even CJ Stroud, I would prefer to see sit for a while, and even Bryce Young. I think every single quarterback should sit for a year once they get drafted, but Hendon Hooker's one of the few that I think has to. Like, if you throw him out in the fire, I think you're going to kill his development even worse. person. He already, needs to fix up a lot of things. And I think really before anything needs to figure out NFL pro style offenses. And that's what that year, or even if it's not a full year, is going to help with, is helping him understand the difference between an NFL offense, because that Tennessee offense really, I think, will be the hardest thing for him to come into the pros now, is because that was so quarterback friendly and so easy on him. As a prospect, I have a lot of concerns about Hendon Hooker. His, I think his ability in the run game has definitely been overblown as to what he can actually accomplish. I don't feel that good about him extending plays. Now, compared to some people, yes, I think, let me make this clear. I think he's a significantly better prospect than, pretty much everybody outside of that top 4. I think Hendon Hooker will maybe even have a better NFL career than Anthony Richardson. And that may be just because I'm very low on Anthony Richardson compared to some people, or, Anthony Richardson needs everything to go right. Hendon Hooker, I think, could figure things out. I think he's going to be a guy that could be an NFL backup for a long time, and that wouldn't surprise me at all. I still don't think I'd take him in the first round, but obviously with the quarterback premium, it makes a ton of sense. And I do kind of feel for him in the same time, because I think he'd be a top 10 pick if he had finished out this past year. He was playing really good. Even if Tennessee didn't ask too much of him at times, he made all the right plays. He did everything they asked of him, and he was going to win the Heisman Trophy. The fact that he still got a bunch of first place votes after still tearing his ACL and missing time, he was easily going to run away with the Heisman Trophy. And I think, going into the Heisman ceremony, there's questions of who should win it. And, the fact that it was even up for debate kind of shows that Hendon Hooker would have absolutely won if it wasn't for the injury. Still hurts a little bit that he transferred from Virginia Tech, but it ended up being the right call for him. And Virginia Tech was going through a whole mess. Justin Fuente gets fired. They move on to Brent Pry, and it ended up being the right decision for Hendon Hooker. And ultimately, it not only saved his college career, but now he has an actual chance to make it in the NFL. And while I don't feel great about him as a prospect and have a lot of concerns, I can promise you that I will be rooting for him more than anybody else in this class.